All right, welcome back to the show, Dr. Gabor Maté.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Yeah, good to have you here. I know you like and prefer Gabor, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, Gabor, last time we talked a lot about marriage, relationships, relational injuries, traumas, how sensitive we all are. And I want to go a little further today. You up for that?
We'll find out, won't we?
We will. Okay, I want to start out just with the overview of reminding the listener, really, that you're obviously a doctor who's done a lot of trailblazing work. You're into very alternative medicines and treatments, just trying to get at the human condition and trying to help people from their suffering. And it seems like Western medicine and psychotherapy can be good, and they only take us so far. Would you just, to start us out, would you talk about, for the listener who's maybe having marriage problems or their past traumas are coming up in their marriage or their history, where is psychotherapy and even psychiatric medication and stuff, where is that potentially helpful, and where do we stop and we need to actually go further with something else?
Western modalities, from psychotherapy to medications, are fundamentally aimed at making the ego more functional, which is not a bad goal. If you're depressed, if you are caught up in a trauma vortex, if you are not functioning, if you cannot make decisions, if you're confused, if you are lacking motivation, sense of clarity, it's good to gain clarity. It's good not to be depressed. It's good to get motivation. And psychotherapy can help. And for people, for all the controversy around medications, I've seen medications profoundly help people function better at a much higher level in their lives. No question about it. However, what the Western modalities do not take into account is that there's more to us than just the ego. Then there's more to us than just the functioning in the world self. Yeah. That there's a deeper humanity to us, or spiritual people might say a deeper divinity to us, although I know that there's a difference. And the fundamental resolution of human suffering has to go deeper than just the troubles or dysfunctions or strengths of the ego. And so traditional modalities, shamanic modalities from cultures around the world, spiritual modalities from around the world, West and East, aim at a deeper connection with life than simply the functioning ego. And that's where Western medicine, which aims at a cure, does not aim at healing, because the healing means the completeness, the wholeness. And Western medicine has really no sense of that wholeness. It has a sense of, now something is broken to fix it, perhaps, but the integration of who we truly are and our connection to the world, those are not concerns that Western medicine largely knows how to look at.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. Now, so this is where some great teachers are able to bring together Western psychological insights and Eastern spirituality.
Yep. Yeah, and you've promoted and talked about plant medicine, and can you talk about that? You've talked about Buddhism and clearly meditation and mindfulness. Would you say a few things about your experience with ayahuasca and people with ayahuasca, say, as a additional treatment to help them get at some of these quote problems that they have maybe on the surface that actually can facilitate a deeper sense of wholeness and lead someone to maybe finding out who they truly are?
Sure. First of all, for those that don't know, ayahuasca is a plant that grows in the Amazon jungle. It's a vine, a woody, thick vine that the shamans, the medicine people there, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, the evidence is interesting but not conclusive, but quite some time ago, discovered that if they harvest that vine, chop it up, and mix it together with another plant called chakruna, which is a green plant, and they boil it together for a number of hours, it yields a brew that opens up the mind and takes you deeper than your ordinary sense of reality.
Yeah.
However, it's very important here not to focus on the physiological or even psychological effects of the plant. It's very important to understand that this particular plant and its use developed in the context of a tradition. And that tradition is called vegetalismo, which is our unity with the plant world. So the cultures in which ayahuasca came to be used in Brazil and Peru and Colombia and in Ecuador, I think, it wasn't about this particular plant. It was actually a whole culture of connection with the plant world, which is human beings' basic unity with creation. And there were many plant teachers. Ayahuasca was only one of them. And that's the first point. The second point is that it's not a drug in the Western sense. You know, if I, as a physician, if you come to me for depression and I might decide to suggest that you take Prozac, which could possibly help you, I'm simply trying to change the biology of your brain as long as you're on the medication. But I'm not really, first of all, involving myself in the process, except as a prescriber.
Yep.
And secondly, I'm not aiming at an ultimate healing. I'm just looking at the control of certain very disturbing symptoms, which is not an illegitimate goal necessarily, not at all. In fact, again, it can be very helpful. But there's a big difference because the shamans who work with the plants, including ayahuasca, have been through their own initiation process themselves. They work with the plants. They've gone through very harsh, very difficult, very rigorous, very demanding process of transformation themselves.
Yeah, so, countless hours.
So in countless hours and weeks and days and years. And so in coming to you as a healer, they're bringing a full awareness of their own woundedness, of their own travails, of their own humanity to the process. Number one. Number two, when they give you the plant medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or anything else, and in the West we tend to glamorize ayahuasca, but really it's part of a tradition. When they come to you with that, they're not trying to change the biology of your brain, because you only be taking the substance for a ceremony. You might do 3 ceremonies over 3 nights. You might do 10 ceremonies over 12 nights. You might do a number of ceremonies repeatedly throughout the year, but you're not permanently on a drug to change the biology of your brain. What it's really about is to afford you a glimpse into some aspects of yourself that otherwise you're not connected with. It's to actually alter your consciousness, not just while you're on the substance, but particularly beyond it.
To allow you to see things, right? See more clearly yourself.
Exactly. So it's not about changing the biology of your brain. It's actually about expanding your mind. So it's a very different, very different modality than the Western medical approach.
Yeah. Okay. And so with this tradition and the sort of popularity of, let's say, ayahuasca in the West and in the North here, it seems kind of in to do ayahuasca in a way in a certain New Age circles, right? It's like, oh, I went to my latest ayahuasca ceremony. And I've done, I've participated a bunch myself and have had friends, and it's not for everybody. So some people actually it's almost like it pulls the veil back further to see and reveal traumas that maybe haven't been dealt with. And I'm curious if there's too much and too fast. And also with certain shamanic healers, there's no kind of group psychotherapy or additional process to go along with it. So some people are sort of left, and the instruction is to drink more medicine. So I'm curious what your take is on these types of styles of doing it.
Yeah. Again, we have to recall that the use of such plants arose in a context, in a cultural context, where there was a shared set of assumptions and beliefs and practices, and in fact, a community.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bunch of strangers getting together for one night and saying goodbye in the morning.
Right.
And there were certain, the symbols were shared. You know, the visions were from a world that they all understood and took part in.
Yeah. Part of daily living as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Westerners tend to jump on things because, this is going to heal me. So they think it's all about the substance. So they drink the substance. It's often without regard for the context. But the context is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So who's leading the ceremony? It's a ceremony. It's not just, here's you drink this stuff and it's going to do something to you. This is a ceremony in which this particular substance is a sacrament. And it'll help you, but the chanting, which has to be very specific to what's happening for you right now, that shaman has to be connected with you and chanting to you based on what's happening for you at that moment.
Yeah.
Well, when you do ayahuasca in a garage loft in New York City with a bar music drifting into the window next door, that ain't no ayahuasca ceremony.
Right.
And number one, number two, without romanticizing anything, because there's plenty of problems done in the Amazonian cultures where ayahuasca emanates from. But the complexity of Western life and the complexity of the Western psychological makeup is such that the ayahuasca by itself can open things up, but it can also open things up in a way that you don't know what to do with.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is where we've developed the work of, and not just, when I say we, I mean the people that I work with and myself, but others that I know of having the ceremony happen in a context where there's preparation, there's intention setting, where there's guidance. Then a ceremony happens, and then there's processing and integration of the material that arises. Because people can often see symbols and images and go through some very painful, even terror-struck feelings, or sometimes emotions of bliss and unity and visions of, but that has to be brought back into real life. And it's not that the plant is doing this to you. It's that the plant opens up what's inside you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about developing a relationship with what's really there. You need guidance for that.
Yeah.
Depending on the individual and how deep they go and how much trauma is uncovered or how much truth is uncovered, some people can have these experiences and do quite well with them. But for the most part, I believe that it's far more meaningful and safe and potentially helpful to have it in a context where you get that kind of support, where the preparation, there's the safety, there's a group cohesion, there's a group there that you're working with, you're not on your own, you're not with strangers, and afterwards there's processing, there's integration, and when you go back into your life, which is what really matters, you have some guidance as to how to incorporate these teachings that you received into your daily life.
Yeah. So it seems like the guidance you're getting, and that can look like what? A psychotherapist? That can look like what else? What could that look like?
Well, ideally, it should be somebody that knows something about the plant, has experienced it themselves, and can help you interpret your experiences in a way that speaks to your experience.
Yeah.
So, psychotherapist, well, you can say the word psychotherapist, but it all depends who you mean by it.
Yeah.
What depth of experience and insight they bring. I mean, at our retreats, we get psychotherapists coming for themselves or to deepen their work. And what's constantly the case is that the psychotherapists who come will say afterwards that when they went back the next day, when they started working, their work with their clients became so much deeper.
Uh-huh.
So it's ideal it's a psychotherapist who has experienced something of transformation themselves. And whether they do ayahuasca or not, at least I have a broader than Western understanding of the human psyche and the human mind.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. What about LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, these other alternative substances, medicines to, again, get at our deep psychological traumas and challenges?
Well, as we know, there's been a lot of research. In the 50s, early 60s, there was a lot of legitimate research on LSD for addictions and other mental health issues. Very positive looking research. Mm-hmm. Then what happens was that in the 60s, there was the, you might call psychedelic revolution, which really was an unfortunate episode in the sense that psychedelics became popular and not as healing modalities, but as kind of ways to take a trip with away from reality. And sometimes to get a different view of reality, but it was very much like Mickey Mouse in the Walt Disney cartoon Sorcerer's Apprentice, where, if you recall, he's the assistant to a sorcerer who's got these magic tools and ways of effecting positive events. But when Mickey gets a hold of this magic, he just does everything up. Everything just goes total chaos. Well, that's what happened in the 60s. People that were not trained, people who were not respectful of tradition, people that were not aware of the power, all of a sudden started using these plants or substances.
Yeah.
With a lot of negative effects, which then reinforced the already very strong establishment prejudice against such modalities. So it all got shut down.
Yeah.
Now there has been a resurgence of research, precisely because of the limitations of Western medicine. So a lot of therapists, psychiatrists, physicians, and others have rekindled the interest in the use of these substances. So there's been serious research now with psilocybin, which is mushrooms, in end-of-life anxiety at Johns Hopkins University, at UCLA. Studies done with MDMA, including in Boulder, where you are, and including in Vancouver, where I am, sanctioned, case-controlled, studies of MDMA in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. The results so far have been much more than encouraging, and much more powerful, actually, than anything else we know for PTSD. There are studies with ayahuasca that have been done, of course, in the Latin American countries where it's not illegal. And so there are these modalities that are now being researched and possibly brought online as the research validates their use.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you... I'm curious how it all applies if we bring it back to relationship and attachment. There's so much cool stuff coming out around the neuroscience right now, neurobiology, interpersonal neurobiology, about the power of adult relationships to kind of heal and work through some of our early attachment injuries, which I want to get into that a little bit as well. Can some of this, the psilocybin, LSD, it seems like so much of it can be an internal experience. Like you said, it sort of shows me what is already true inside. But what about the healing relationship in terms of having someone hold my hand or be with me or go home to a partner that's actually safe and cares about me? Isn't that all part of this kind of an integrated way to heal? Or what are your thoughts on sort of the early attachment and some of these alternative substances?
Well, it's just a fact that all our dysfunctions, all our relationship problems, all the pain that we carry, all the resentment that we harbor, all the anger that we generate at our partners, originates in early trauma. And when that shows up, then instead of seeing the partner in the present who is with us, we're seeing somebody who hurt us.
Yeah, the oppressor.
When we're small and helpless, whether they meant to or not.
Yeah.
And so, but the point is that we were hurt in a relationship. I mean, necessarily because we were born into a relationship. We could not have lived without a relationship. Therefore, if we got hurt, it was in a relationship. And it also means that we're going to heal in relationship. So that means that, as I think maybe we talked about last time, relationships, with or without substances now, can be the ground for healing when are approached properly. Now, whereas psychedelics can play into that, is they take people very quick places. Otherwise, they may take a long time to get to.
Yeah.
So, a recent client who had a psychedelic session said, and this is not unusual to hear, this day was like 10 years of psychotherapy.
You're right.
It just takes you that much deeper. Now, it ain't as simple as that, because now that awareness still has to be integrated. But this person, for example, who had somebody in their life who all they could see before was their dysfunction and their arrogance and their narcissism and their unreliability, all of a sudden saw in the other person the wounded child and had compassion for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how they'll approach that, maybe, listen, I'm so sorry, I see how troubled you are, but it doesn't work for me to work with you. It doesn't work for me to be with you when you're in that state.
Yeah.
Or it might allow them to approach them compassionately and say, I see how troubled you are. I think let's work together so that we're not hurting each other anymore. So how that plays out, I'm not so concerned with. I'm talking about that after one day, they could see this other in a completely different light. Why? Because they developed some compassion for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to reinforce what you said, that ayahuasca nor any other modalities for everybody. So nobody listening to this conversation should hear it as some kind of a general recommendation. We're just talking about one possibility of work, one way of approaching the human experience. It's not the only way. It's not more legitimate than other ways. It has certain benefits for some people. It has certain drawbacks or pitfalls as well. So we're just talking about one particular possibility here.
I know that the healing journey can be subjective. Obviously, case by case, everybody's different, unique constitution, unique healer, unique environment, context, all that matters. And what are you seeing, given your countless hours of experience here, what are you seeing as some of the most effective treatments going on right now for early childhood trauma, for example, that then impacts our adult relationships?
Do I have an hour to sit with that question?
Sure. I'll hang out.
I would say that any modality that helps you get into the present moment. Because trauma is all about being caught up in the past. When I am with my spouse and we're in a moment of tension, and more tension on my part begets more tension on her part, we're not in the present moment.
Yeah.
So any modality that gets you into the present moment, whether at that point it's conscious breathing, or whether it's getting in touch with the body. So modalities that help you get into the present moment. So yoga, meditation, body work.
And why, Gabor, why does the present moment matter so much? What's that going to do for my trauma?
Because in the present moment, there's no trauma. Trauma is, by definition, not being in the present moment. The traumatized person can't be in the present moment. They're always interpreting the present in the light of the past.
Yeah.
So let's say you asked me the same question you just asked me now. And let's say you asked it in exactly the same tone with the same facial expression that you asked it just now.
Okay.
But let's say I'm so insecure that I take it as an attack on my intellectual capacities.
Sure.
And then I react with tension or defensiveness or hostility. Am I in the present moment? That's what trauma is.
Yeah.
Trauma basically manifests in two ways. And a major one is an incapacity to be in the present moment. So anything that gets you to the present moment, it doesn't matter what. See, the thing is, the trauma is not what happened a long time ago. I mean, the trauma is not the events that happened. The trauma is not that you were abused or neglected. The trauma is not that your father or mother left or died, or that your parents fought, or that your father drank, or that your mother was depressed. That's not the trauma. The trauma is the impact of that on you. And when those things are happening to small, sensitive human beings, one way you cope with it is you dissociate from the present moment because it's too painful. And we can dissociate in any number of ways: by tuning out, by shutting down our feelings, by not sensing our bodies, by projecting our thoughts elsewhere, in ways. But that's what the trauma is. Then moving forward, then we're no longer in the present moment.
Yeah.
So that's what the trauma is.
Okay, good. So very, very sort of simple reminder here to get in the present moment, right? And a lot of us have a hard time with that. Any recommendations on how to stay in the present moment? Because I don't know anybody that's 100% present, right? We all get kind of taken out by life in a certain way. Like, what's a simple or your favorite go-to thing to get in the present moment?
Well, it's interesting that implicit in your formulation is a distinction between life and the present moment. We all get taken up by life, so we can't be in the present moment, you know? I just think about that one.
Yeah.
Where does that come from, that distinction? Look, I'm no expert on being in the present moment. I know the value of it. I know the loss of it, because it shows up in my life all the time.
Yeah.
There are great teachers who are far more suited to guide people to the present moment than I am. But I know that's where the reality actually is. And I know where the trauma has had the impact of disconnecting us from the present moment.
So are you, like, when you get disconnected, what's your favorite way or most helpful way that you come back?
You see, I hesitate to answer because I just don't want to create any false impressions that here's this guy that really knows how to do it.
Well, you know how to do it sometime, right? Just for yourself, you know how to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I do. Well,
I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but...
Well, the thing is, you're talking to me at a moment when self-care has become a huge issue for me.
Okay.
Because the need for it has been driven home to me very, very sharply. And so I can tell you that you need space. You have to create space around yourself. Yeah. You can't do everything your mind tells you should do. You can't take it all on. You can't heal the whole world. You can't fix everything. You can't do everything. You can't fulfill every appetite, every drive. You got to have space around it. You got to create space.
And it sounds like you're talking to yourself here. This is what you're working with right now.
I'm talking very much about myself, but it's also advice for everybody, because in our busy, harried life, there's just no space.
Yeah.
So we have to, if that is the value, we have to create the space. That means space from the screens in front of us.
Yeah.
Space from our devices, space from activities. Now, then there are certain modalities. Yoga I found very helpful. And I've only had a yoga practice a little over half a year.
Yeah.
But it's made a huge difference for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, like, even just to get present, sometimes we might need to create the space because we're so inundated and we're so, quote, busy, right? So just saying no is going to help us get present, perhaps.
And as you know, I've written a book called When the Body Says No, and where my contention is that if we don't know how to say no, the body will say it.
Yeah, we get sick, we fall down, we get hurt, we get something to kind of rest, right?
Something, the body's going to just do it for us, and sometimes it'll do it in catastrophic ways. I am having to really learn that what I teach for others might perhaps apply to me as well. Is that possible?
Yeah, you think?
Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe. So, again, meditation, conscious breathing, being out in nature. I mean, I'm not saying anything profound here, but it's a question of what we create space for in our lives, where we put our attention, and you have to really ask yourself, what is your intention? Is my intention that there should be peace in my relationship? Or is my intention that I should get a lot of work done?
Uh-huh.
Because if the two intentions are compatible, that's great. But what if they're not? And you have to have enough consciousness to be able to evaluate when the one is not compatible with the other.
Yeah.
You have to really say, well, what is my actual intention? And very much it's like going to an ayahuasca ceremony as well. I mean, when you go to a ceremony, it's good to have an intention. What is it that I want to find out? Well, same in life.
Yeah, and if we have a partner, how about we get on the same page with our intentions so we know what I really want and what you really want and what our values are.
Even in a conversation, we tend to drift into conversations or fall into conversations. But what if at the beginning of every conversation we said, my intention for this conversation is that whatever happens, I want to honor your truth and hear what you have to say.
Be nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that, in other words, if there was intentionality behind our communication.
Sure. Yeah. Because so often I come to the table, if I'm in a relationship with you, and I come with my history and I project that and I react and yeah. Yeah, cool.
And what if we come with the intention that, okay, we may get triggered because that just happens, but as soon as we do, we're going to recognize that we're being triggered, and then instead of acting from that place or speaking from that place, we're going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Until we proceed. So again, it's just a matter of creating space.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Couple more questions, then we'll stop. When you and your wife get into a snag, clearly we talked last time a little bit about what doesn't work. Like if you think of a recent challenge you had with her, you guys have been married 40 years, right?
48.
48, geez. Yep, 40, okay.
49. We've been together 50 years.
Wow. So after 50 years, what changes and what works and what stops working? Like I'm just curious, just a little insight into just maybe one share from your current relationship learnings.
Our experience is that sometimes we go back to old places. But as a really great family therapist once said to us that we go back to old places as long as we have something to learn there.
Yeah.
So if we find ourselves in an old place and it seems so familiar and so negatively familiar, then we can ask, well, okay, why did we have to come back here? Where is it that we still, not why did we have to come back here, but why did we have to come back here? Mm-hmm. What is there still to be learned? So I think this phrase that I use, compassionate curiosity, that if you find yourself in places that are difficult, just be curious, and be curious with compassion. So not with judgment. Like to say, why did we come back here? It's a judgment. It's not a question.
Yeah.
But it's, well, why did we come back here? What's going on?
Yeah, I want to understand.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I love that question. Just that alone is huge. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, cool. Anything else, Gabor, just for, the listener about marriage, long-term partnership, that you would just recommend with all of your experience? What's just another little takeaway for the listener?
Well, the teaching from every spiritual master is that our responsibility is limitless. So that I'm 100% responsible for how I am in this relationship. So that, and I'm not talking about guilt now, I'm talking about responsibility, which is the capacity to respond. So that no matter what you do, if I'm in a relationship with you, no matter what you do and no matter what you present, how I respond is entirely up to me. And my task is to free myself sufficiently that I can respond in the present moment, not based on past programming. Yeah. And that's what freedom is. But that it's not a question of 50-50. It's 100%, 100%.
Yeah, I love it.
And which is not to say that I made you do what you do, but that whatever you do, how I respond to that is 100% on me.
And
and you're not causing
right.
me to be the way I am being. I'm not your victim. You're not my victim. Um, as long as I choose to be with you, which I may choose not to be, should it come to that, under some situations, it's untenable to stay together for some people, as we know. But for the most part, as long as we are together, then how I show up in a relationship is 100% my responsibility.
Yes.
And that's why I need to look with inside.
Yeah. How do I guess, sub question there, because you mentioned it, the guilt. One tip on how to work with if someone goes into, oh yeah, it's my fault. Yeah. Oh shit. They turn responsibility into fault somehow, and
It's,
self-blame. What's the suggestion there?
in our society, there's a real tendency to blame. If something is wrong, somebody has to be blamed for it. So instead of looking, of course, blame induces shame. We all defend ourselves against shame. And what ended up happening is that nobody, or people have trouble taking responsibility because they're still defending against the shame of guilt and blame.
Right.
But what's lacking there, guilt is an act of the ego. If we realize that the ego is not personal, which, as Eckhart Tolle teaches, which it isn't, it's universal, really. What the ego does is not personal either. But the ego loves to make everything all about itself. So it loves guilt.
Yeah.
Because it's all about it.
Yeah.
So the guilt and the blame that we lay on ourselves or others, but in this case ourselves, what's lacking there is the compassion. So taking responsibility means, yes, I did that. I'm the one who did that. I'm the one that was there when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But
And yes, I feel this way, and etc.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
mine. It's mine to deal with.
but I'm not going to carry that burden. I'm going to be in the present moment, and my intention is how to be in such a way that I don't repeat those patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's taking responsibility. That's power.
Yeah.
The guilt is a lack of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually keeping yourself stuck in the ego.
Yeah. Cool. So listener, you want to rewind probably that last 10 minutes there just to really get this one about personal responsibility. That's awesome. Thanks for that reminder. Cool. Gabor, where are you headed? What are you up to in your life so we can kind of keep an eye on, it sounds like taking space is good. That's something on the
So
yeah.
I've had, within the last couple of weeks, I've made some major decisions, which is I will not be leading retreats this year.
Okay.
For example, with ayahuasca,
Mm-hmm.
do in Latin America, but I'm not going to do that. I'll be saying no to new speaking requests. I'm giving up some previous ones. I need to create space in my life and allow something new to emerge for myself in my relationship, and I don't want. I'm not going to be compelled by my drive to be out there and be the healer and be that certain person out there and do all these things and help everybody. It's a big no that is finally emerging out of me.
Mm-hmm.
High time, and I'm grateful for it. Difficult as it is, but that's what's not that I'm not doing events and so on. I am, but the biggest dynamic right now is actually to divest and to create space.
Yeah. Wow. It's powerful teaching for me to hear. Thank you. Thanks for working on that and modeling that. Cool. Well, thanks so much for your time. I guess that means I may not get a chance to interview you again for another year, but I'm grateful, so grateful for just your wisdom and all that you're sharing today and all the experience. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.